Jade. Thank you for joining me today for the interview. Um, this interview is we're gonna perform 12 questions. You can answer however you want, however you think you're answering the question. I will not give you context
Okay.
them, which is totally okay. They're easy questions. But first, I'm going to ask you to please introduce yourself with your name, your last name, how I met you, your connection with Holt, because I know that you have connections with Holt in this case.
Mhm.
Um, and then for you to talk a little bit about yourself.
All right. Hi, my name is Jay. Thank you for inviting me, Sophia. Um, well, I guess we met through we're BBA Holt alumni. And then as for myself, I grew up in California, but I live in Florida now. And I'm currently working in a marketing firm doing client management. And yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, great. Perfect. Thank you. So you're an Holt alumni. That's great. Okay, so I'm gonna jump into asking you the first question,
Mhm.
which is what factors do you believe have the biggest impact on your team satisfaction and overall performance based on your team experiences so far through life?
That's a really good question. I mean, the first thing that pretty much popped into my head was kind of like transparency and honesty. Listen, like in life, there's deadlines, but at the same time, like things happen. I think it's just being really important to be verbal and letting your teammates know what's going on. I think another point is that I mentioned transparency is kind of the beginning, just pointing out like what are your like skills. For example, like is your strength writing? Is your strength like more presenting? I think pointing that out and being able to match roles is really important. And then I guess the last skill that I would say is super important is kind of just probably there's so many. I would probably say like time management. Again, I know like things happen in life, but just kind of planning out ahead of time a schedule and getting everyone on board with that is really important.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The second question is, can you describe a time when a team member in whichever project you decide exceeded expectations, and what do you think that drove their performance?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think there's two like people that kind of like I remember distinctively. One, I wouldn't say per se that their performance excelled, but they did certain things that other teammates haven't that I believe is the reason why we succeeded. Which was he in particular like he was super honest in the sense that let's say he got a piece of work done and he wasn't super confident about it, like he would message me privately or message the group chat and would ask for feedback. I think asking for feedback, that vulnerability, was something that helped us excel because instead of, I know some people, they don't like confrontation. So I think just being able to put it out there that, hey, like, I want us to do the best we could do, give me feedback was really great. And then another teammate I had, she excelled just because she was constantly responding in the group chat, super communicative, got her work done on time. I think those are things that, yeah, it seems simple, but when you do everything like all together, which is time management, communication, good work, all of the above, it creates a really great team member.
That's great, thank you. And this was a team in during your education.
Yes, I mean, I was just assuming that it was during my whole BBA like time there. I don't remember specifically the project. I know one. I like probably socially responsible business. That was like the one I was talking to the first scenario. The other one I can't recall the class, but I do recall the girl.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next question, and it's going to be, how do you ensure that your team feels their contributions are directly connected to meaningful outcomes?
Okay. Well, in full transparency, I've always taken on the role of like let you do this, you do that. Not like I ask everyone first what their strengths are and then ask them what role they want to do. And then usually everyone kind of picks and it usually works out pretty well. Um, but I guess so that's like the first step of making someone feel like they're adding something to the project or whatever, is just kind of them feeling like they're in a role that they're secure in. I guess the second would be like good feedback. I mean, when someone like gives a lot of times we would like give the work to each other that we've done and ask for feedback, and then from there you give like constructive feedback. But you kind of sandwich it, compliment, fix something, compliment, um, and those usually worked out. And then at the same time, at the end of the projects, usually it's like always like, congrats guys, that was a great presentation. Like I think just constantly like giving good feedback. I mean, as much as like during any project, there's gonna be some like little spats here and there, disagreements, or you might not like somebody's work, but point out something positive about it. So, for example, I work with somebody who did some slides that weren't the most aesthetically pleasing. I said, hey, like this is a great color palette. This is a great idea, or I like that you put this and this. But do you mind if I change this, or could you change this? Um, and they never felt like offended. They actually appreciated it more because in the long term, it leads to a better result.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question is, have you ever noticed a change in team dynamics when certain members received recognition or rewards? If so, what was the impact?
Like certain team members received and others didn't.
Yeah, you can say that. Whatever you
Okay,
want to judge. Maybe teams received it, some team members received it, and some didn't.
right.
Some everyone received it, but you were thinking about someone in particular. Like, up to you, your interpretation.
I mean, I guess that everyone's been on like both ends. In specific, the ones where a team member received it and I didn't. You're always like a little disappointed. You're always wondering what you didn't do, but at the same time, it depends how you reflect. If you reflect and say, "Hey, maybe this guy, like this person, needed that recognition," or maybe like they really excelled in something, and but overall the whole group was complimented because if he excels or she excels or they excel, we all excel. And then I've also been on the other end where I received it and others haven't. And there's two sides of it. One is obviously I'm very proud of the work that I put in, and I'm glad I got the recognition, especially if I was the only one getting the recognition or only certain group members. It's because we displayed how much work we put into it compared to other group members, because it's not always fair in groups. But at other times, there is that discomfort because your group members might look at you a certain way, you might feel a certain way. But I think I also always kind of like push it onto the group. So if I were to get recognition, I would just say, yeah, we all worked so hard, or yes, we all did a great job. Thank you, you know?
Okay, perfect. The next question is number 5, which is, what do you think helps team members feel comfortable sharing new ideas or admitting mistakes?
Okay. Well, like I said, I guess this really depends on everyone's approach. The approach I always went for is like, guys, I'm transparent, I'm blunt, be transparent, be blunt. But I think other times, um, it really depends on the person. Some people are willing to own up to it. I think also having one person own up to it kind of shows the group that they could show that vulnerability in a sense. Um, so let's say I would say, hey guys, I'm not super comfortable with my paragraph, or I would love some feedback. They would give it, and then it would entail them in the future to also ask for it, or to also admit that they have a mistake, or to also admit that, hey, I can't meet this deadline. Could somebody help me? Just to have that, I guess, camaraderie um, aids with that. But like I said, it really depends on the person. Some people aren't willing to ask for help, aren't willing to show that they have mistakes. But I guess the only way you could really kind of show them that it's okay is by saying, hey, uh, it's okay.
Yeah, great. Moving on to the next question, how do you adjust your leadership approach when managing different personalities within a team?
Well, I mean, we've learned this in like during our BBA when we did like management classes. There's authoritarian, there's utilitarian, there's all these different leadership styles. Um, and yes, you could have one specifically to you, but like you said, which I agree, is you kind of have to be pliable and mold to each group and each person differently. I guess with certain team members I worked with, I've had to be straightforward and say, hey, this is your task. You have to do A to Z. With other team members, you could give them more liberty. You could just say, hey, your role is to do this. If you need ideas, let me know. But I'm like, you are creative. You got this. I'm going to take a step back. So I guess you have to get a feel of the person and their personality, be able to read them, or just ask them straight up, hey, do you need me to give you like exactly what you need to do, or are you good? Because I've had team members in the past, for example, they get a task and then weeks before, like later, right before the deadline, they're like, hey, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do. Um, and you learn with time. And then I've also learned that it's just better to kind of give someone exactly what they need to do, give them the outline, give them the layout, A to Z, just to be safe. Whether they follow it or not will determine, like later on when they ask for feedback, you could at least have something to refer back to. But yeah, I guess it really just depends on the person. Some people usually take, you could tell right away when you're group setting who kind of takes on leadership roles. And then from there, you could decide if you want to be like an oligarchy and all work together, or sometimes like you got to take a step back, even though, like, for example, myself, I feel like a lot of times I've taken leadership roles, but in groups where there's a lot of heads butting, we just take on like different roles in the sense of like no one's a leader, but everyone has an opinion. And then we all just kind of decide on each role together.
Sounds good. Thank you for sharing. The next question is, um, can you share an example of how you've navigated a situation where a team member was disengaged or unmotivated?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, there's always been a few. I've for sure had to tell like um, my teacher or in a work situation, a boss, about it. Um, and then other times, sometimes I kind of check in with people. I mean, if someone's not being communicative in the group chat, if they're not answering, if their tasks are coming in time but they're not really asking for feedback, I like to check in and say, hey, is everything okay? X, Y, and Z. I mean, I've had team members who've had family issues during projects, don't want to discuss it. They're super unmotivated. They're like, listen, I've had a team member, her like dog died, like things like that happen in life. I think just having a little empathy and compassion, as well as saying, hey, I'm here to help. I have like this time to help. I could ask the other team members. We could take on the weight a little bit together. Like, this is obviously a special scenario. Um, but unmotivation is really hard, especially because the person themselves has to be motivated. And that's where sometimes there's some disputes that happen in groups, because then you have to take on that the work, the responsibility, and it can be very frustrating. But at the same time, like there is a deadline; it has to get done. But I guess the best way is just trying to be empathetic and say like, "Hey, if you need help, I'm here."
Great. Question 8 will be, what do you believe helps teams stay motivated and engaged over time, especially after completing major projects?
Okay, that I guess like there's I'm gonna talk about it kind of in like a work experience, but I've done this for sure at school. Is kind of like team bonding exercises or going out. I've had like team meetings that don't necessarily have to do with work. Um, in general, like, hey, like after work, let's go grab a drink. Hey, after work, let's grab lunch, or during work, let's grab lunch and we could talk about this, but it's kind of in a more casual setting. I've had like team meetings where they were just on Zoom, but we were just talking about life and like nothing related to work. I think that helps with the motivation, because it's like at the end of the day, when it's long-term projects, you are getting to know these people very well. Um, and to build that rapport, build that trust, be able to keep them motivated if something were to happen, is all about getting to know the people that you work with. Um, and then I guess also in other scenarios, especially when the project is completed, there's such a high, and just sending a message, hey, very, like, good job, guys. So glad I got to work with you. Because you might never know, especially in group projects at school, you never know if you might work with them again.
Great. In your experience, what forms of acknowledgement or feedback seem to resonate most with team members?
Um, For sure, I've noticed the texting, like after a group project, during a group chat, a project, or when someone gives you something to give feedback on, just sending, like, giving them that recognition. Hey, this was great. I really love this. What you did here was great. That is always super appreciated. And then other times I've had like group projects where like I'm like, thank you so much for working with me. This was so great. Let's go grab a coffee. Buying them a coffee, little things like that. Um, I think have been successful and think have shown that appreciation. Um, but also maybe in other group settings, like just also word of mouth, like, hey, I just worked with this person, they did such a great job. They might not know it that you say it, or they might hear it back, but I think no matter what, it's positive.
Okay, thank you. What do you think makes some teams collaborate more effectively than others, even when everyone has similar skills?
See, like when I see, I mean, this is probably more specific to school, but when I saw like group project, I'm like, oh, they have such a good dynamic. I wonder what they did differently, XYZ. But I think like honesty, like really, or transparency is a better word. You could tell which groups communicate and which groups don't. And I think like that's what leads to success in groups because, for example, I've seen people present and it looks like they're all presenting a different presentation. They don't know what the other person's going to say. They haven't practiced. And then you could tell the groups that have practiced, that have talked to each other, they know what they're talking. They're following along. I guess that's the big difference.
Great. Um, Question number 11 is how does the overall team culture influence individual motivation levels? And have you observed any cultural shifts that significantly improved or hindered team performances?
Okay. When you say team culture, are you talking about to the culture of each individual person, or are you talking about like the team dynamic?
However, you want to interpret team culture in this context of an interview.
Is there any chance you could repeat the question then, please?
Yes. I'm going to repeat the first part,
Okay.
and we can discuss it, and then I can ask you the second
Yeah,
part.
that might be better.
Okay, perfect. How does the overall team culture influence individual motivation levels?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna interpret team culture kind of as like dynamic. Um, wait, I like totally forgot the question. I'm so
Okay,
sorry.
totally okay. How does the overall team culture influence individual motivation levels?
Okay, cool. Okay. That's what I thought. So I guess like when a team dynamic's really going smoothly, I mean, at least personally for myself, like I feel super motivated. I'm like, everyone's doing their task. I don't feel like I have to worry about this person or this person. I don't feel like I have to worry about deadlines. I think that really like is important, but also really creates the motivation and affects the team culture because when you don't have to worry about what other groups are doing. You could really focus on your task and not have that anxiety worrying about each other. And yeah.
Great. Then the second part of question 11 will be, have you observed any cultural shifts that significantly improved or hindered team performance?
Um, Hindered is I've worked with people who can't meet deadlines, and it really affects like people differently. Like certain team members are like, oh, whatever. Other team members get more aggressive. And then I think like certain things that have affected the culture positively is communication. I mean, communication is so important. I mean, for the upside, when there's a lack of communication, that also affects the team culture because I know, like, even culturally speaking, like globally, people communicate differently. But I think that there's kind of like a united way to communicate, which is just like answer my questions, answer this, answer that. You don't have to go in depth. You don't have to do anything. But I think just being present is really important. I think also certain things that affect team culture positively or negatively is your presence when we do meet. Are you being verbal? Are you listening? Are you following? Are you giving input? That could really affect team culture.
Great, perfect. And the last question is 12, which is how do you align team objectives with individual team members' personal or professional goals?
Um, I feel like I've touched base a little bit on this, but when you first meet as a group, I think um, how you distribute tasks really helps with people's goals and like what they want to do in the future or their strengths. I myself I'm going to pursue writing. So when I was in group dynamics, I would say, hey, I'm really good with writing. I'm really good with this. I'm not good at this. Like a lot of times presenting was not my strength. But then somebody would say, I love presenting. I love public speaking. Another person will say, hey, I love making slides. Especially like marketing people, for example, they would always usually choose something like that just because it would lead towards their goals and what their passions and all those things. So I think just clarifying those tasks. I think other ways is also like feedback. It's really important to say, hey, like, for example, me, when people would give me feedback, hey, this was really well written. I really like what you said here. It motivates me, but it also helps me really like solidify, like, hey, like this is a good path for me. This is leading to where I wanted to go. I'm glad I got this feedback. Or when it's, let's say, constructive feedback, and they would say, hey, like, it would have been better if you done this. Even like when professors or people you work with, your boss, manager, whatever, when they give you that feedback, it's only helpful when you think of your end goal.
Okay, perfect. Those are all the questions that I have for you in this interview. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for your time. Any final thoughts or questions or anything?
No, I think that's good.
Okay, perfect. Then thank you for your time and text you when I'll process the recording so you
Of
can have
course.
a copy.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.